Hello and welcome back to the Purpose Over Profit podcast. This week we're kind of changing things up. We have two guests on the show today to talk about narcissism. We're really keen to kind of dig deep into what this term means because you hear it bandied about in the kind of current society, especially in our personal lives and even in the workplace, bizarrely. And we want to explore those kind of two options. And plus, we're going to explore what that means in children as well. How can you spot the early signs as well? A bit of an unusual one. But I'm going to introduce our guests first of all. Kathie, would you like to explain who you are and basically a bit of your background, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course, no problem whatsoever. I'm a Rapid Transformational Therapist, which is RTT. I reset people's mindset to move away from fear, anger, procrastination, self-sabotage, anxiety, the whole gambit of feelings and emotions by reprogramming their mind to release all these negative patterns and behaviours. So basically, I'm a mind coach. That's the easiest way to say it.
Fantastic. That's
fantastic. In terms of the relationship to narcissism as well, a lot of that's that narcissism in terms of people that have been affected by narcissists, people that are potentially narcissists themselves, kind of helping them understand and unpick some of that internal trauma that they
yeah, very much so. Quite a number of my clients that I actually see now, I see them for what seemingly is a different reason. But then when I go deeper into the core, the reasons why they are the way they are, there has been narcissistic abuse in their life. And that is the thing that I have to release from them so that they can start living their lives all over again.
Fantastic. That sounds brilliant. And our other guest is Jasmina. Hi, Jasmina.
Hi everyone.
Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? That's okay.
Yes, sure. So I can identify myself as an emotional healer, NLP coach, hypnotherapist, yoga and meditation teacher. So what is important in my work that I'm using various body and mind techniques to help clients connect with themselves again, like reconnect, and then release pain and suffering from their mind, body, and their energy field.
We're obviously going to go a bit deeper into that as well, but we're also going to touch upon your story as well, because you've been impacted by a personal relationship, narcissism as well, which we'll come on to. So I guess for our listeners, what is the easiest way, Kathie, to explain narcissism?
Okay. If you are in a relationship with a narcissistic person, you are actually a victim of an emotionally abusive person. And that abusive person basically can only focus on themselves. They are not concerned about you in any way whatsoever. They will destroy them from you because they need it. They only focus on themselves. They're attention seekers. They have such an abusive impact on you that you no longer believe in yourself, that your self-esteem just drops below zero almost, that you can never live without that person, that they create such a bond with you that you think your life's over if they leave you. That's in a personal relationship. But in a workplace relationship, they can destroy your career.
Wow.
That's how much the satisfaction that they would get if you didn't comply to what they want from you. So they are not nice people, but they go from levels from very low to like completely, oh my God, off the scale narcissism. So, at low level, I remember years ago, people would say, don't be a narc. And you go, what? Don't be a narc? What's a narc? A narc's a pest, somebody that, go away, you're just annoying me, to the full-on narc who will destroy you if you think you can live without them.
It's a really interesting point that you mentioned around like different scales, because obviously at the, I guess, extreme end, you've got narcissistic personality disorder, but obviously there'll be a whole range of people, and so it's expected maybe up to around 5%, but it's estimated. It's not like a lot of people go to the doctors and get diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. There's a real issue around being able to track it and identify it. But I guess there's a whole suite of people that might be exhibiting some narcissistic behaviors, some elements. How do we best differentiate between, I guess, if someone has narcissistic personality disorder and, you know, at quite an extreme level, versus someone potentially displaying some narcissistic characteristics?
Well, in the research that I've actually read, it states that 10% of the population have narcissistic tendencies. So, as I say, on the low level, it's just about being a bit of a nuisance, you know, always seeking attention and things like that. And, you know, where you'll find a narcissist is taking control over you, is manipulating you. That's when you feel that your life is not your own. That is when you start going into the danger zone, if you want to call it that, because that's where a narcissist wants to be. They want to control you, they want to manipulate you, they want to own you. You have no voice, you lose your voice. Often when I work with women who have been in narcissistic relationships, they say they have no voice because nobody listens to them anymore. Because a narcissist will gaslight, which is basically telling stories about you all the time. They will manipulate people around you. They will isolate you from friends, family, colleagues, all sorts of things just to control you. And if you ever try to get away from a narcissist, they will make it so difficult for you that you'll think, what's the point? Nobody will believe me. If I say this, they'll just say, there's something wrong with that woman. You know, that's the way they make you feel, that you have no self-confidence, no self-esteem, that their moods, you have to almost try and predict their moods in advance. It's like walking on eggshells. It's so scary. And the only way to resolve that is to go full no contact with them. And there's a lot of steps in between.
Do you know what's so interesting, Kathie? You mentioned the no contact. I was doing a bit of research and I seen that it says no contact, and I was like, that sounds tremendous. But then in a work environment, that's obviously quite hard and challenging, because I'm sure we're going to come on to Jasmina soon, but I personally have worked with narcissistic people. I knew one really well, and Darren knew them really well as well. But what I was interested to find out was, when I did my research, is that you've got overt people, which is the people I know of, show off, this is flashy, I've got this, I pretend, all this kind of really dangerous side of it, where they can become, there can be a little bit of substance abuse, all this kind of stuff mixed into it. Yeah. But what I didn't realise was you get the covert ones as well, which I was amazed at, the people that are really quiet, that draw you in, make them feel like a victim. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, there's just so many different types. You know, when you're able to go no contact, and even in the workplace, no contact in a workplace means limited contact. It means, yes, you still have to work with that person, but because you know that person will lie, they will cheat, they will make up stories, they will take credit for your work, all of these things, you need to put down everything in an email to them. So if you've had some kind of contact with them and you want to do some piece of work with them, a task that he's part of, she's part of, whatever, you need to put the details in an email, and you need to protect yourself, because that person in the workplace will try and discredit you. And they will even go to the extreme of using HR to get you fired if they think they can use rules and regulations to bring you down. So that's the worst end narcissist at work. That's what they can do.
It sounds like, in terms of trying to understand whether you're with someone with NPD, you know, narcissist personality disorder, or whether it's just someone displaying symptoms, sounds like the severe and severity of it, the frequency of it happening within that relationship. I mean, you mentioned around the workplace there as well, and something that came to mind was, we've all probably worked with people at some point. I know certainly, I guess speaking for myself, I have, where people are looking to get credit for the work that you've done. Could even be your boss. They potentially dislike you and discredit you. Where do you draw the line, I guess, particularly in the workplace there, around someone where there's a clash of personalities, there's maybe just a difference of opinion, there's a fallout, versus something which sounds a lot more sinister. And maybe that's where the words came in and being used a lot more frequently. Where do you draw the line, I guess, between, personality clash, disagreements within the workplace, and I guess that narcissistic behavior? Or are they sometimes both the same?
I think if you're looking at narcissistic behavior, it is persistent. It doesn't stop. And they will constantly try to control your thoughts, your behaviors, to make them look good. It's all about making them look good. So the other type of just maybe a personality clash, we've all clashed with people in the past, but they don't try to completely control us. That's the difference with a narcissist. They must have control. They must feel as though people respect them, people admire them. In a workplace situation, they'll schmooze with senior management, almost like the spy in the office, type thing, so that they can report back that everybody's doing their job. They have an inflated sense of importance, because they feel as though, look at me, recognize me. My opinions are important, but these people, nah, just forget about them. They're just minions. Ask me, I'll tell you the truth. That's what you get from a narcissist. You don't get that from just a difference of opinion.
And obviously, we're talking about a work setting, and we're trying to imagine. In fact, we don't even have to imagine. People you've worked with in the past that have these certain traits. And there's a great book out there called Dangerous Personalities, which I've read as well. It talks about looking out for predators, looking out for narcissists, all this kind of stuff that gives you a checklist. And when you do that checklist, it can give you a range of, if you've scored 65 and above, then that's a narcissist. Keep away from them. And it was quite scary doing that exercise, and you start to think about the people you work with. But I guess on a personal level, then you're talking about no contact. But I'm going to ask Jasmina, because Jasmina, do you want to explain your situation about how this narcissistic relationship impacts you?
Yeah, actually, it was with my mom. So it started, of course, since I was born. Basically, she was a narcissistic my whole life. What I didn't understand is that she was manipulating with me through my whole childhood, and then eventually later on as well. I developed, with 19 years old, I developed an autoimmune disease because I wanted her attention. I wanted her to see me. And what happened, she never ever showed up in the hospital, nothing, in this way. She basically was looking and protecting herself, her own image. She was not able to show to the people around her that her daughter is sick or whatever. That was the main issue in her head. When I realized that she is not able to even think about me or what I'm going through, I basically healed myself. And that was my path to self-discovery and to this spiritual life that I'm in right now, and everything, and in helping people in that way. The relationship didn't change. She basically stayed narcissistic even today. She's still trying to manipulate in every way, with sweet, kind stuff. Do you want something to eat? From that point, and then to much bigger things, So how to completely, not be present in our parents' life, that's really hard. So what you need to develop is that shell around yourself, so that you can protect yourself in order to survive. It's not easy. It's always there, because she is someone that should be probably my best friend, my, guidance, everything. I should be coming to her for advice. So, it's really hard when you discover that she's, relationship with with your mom is not the way you would like the relationship to be like. So it's not easy. Yeah.
And I appreciate you kind of coming on and sharing that with us. I think part of this discussion, we hope to kind of highlight narcissism in general, hopefully clarify it for a few people as well, including Chris and I, but also, I guess, understanding, a real story about it, how you've been personally affected, I think is so powerful, so effective. And I wonder whether you can take us back to, I guess, your childhood, when you can think about those early sort of signs for you that was like, something's not right here. You wouldn't have had a label, you wouldn't have known the word narcissism, but
no.
What are some of your kind of earlier memories around like looking back almost and reflecting on what was narcissistic behavior?
Well, she was always telling me bad things about me. I grew up in believing that I'm stupid, that I'm not capable of doing anything, that I'm never going to be able to succeed in something I wanted to be, good at. That she's the only one that can help me, from coming from one place to another place, with the education as well. It was always about her and the image that she's presenting on the outside. It was all about her friends, the family. We were not supposed, me and my sister as well, we were not supposed to be showing to other people that something is wrong in the family. Everything was perfect, always. She was perfect. She did everything. She managed to open the company. It was always her alone. She never ever had support. But we were on the, at the back end doing all the work, basically. So I started working when I was 13, honestly, because she opened the company and she needed, like my sister likes to say, slaves, so that she can, say to the outer world that she succeeded in everything. She did everything by herself. She bought a house. She did this. She did that. It's always about her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really interested then, because you mentioned she started a company. So I guess that trait of narcissism, or whatever else you want to call it just now, that won't hide itself, will it? Even in a business setting when she's her own company. Have you seen her transfer that personality into her work life as well?
She was the same. She was torturing. We had probably like 20 workers or something like that, because everything was in the house. Like company was family owned, and I you can see the girls working there. They were terrified of her. Mm-hmm. She was really scary, even today with 70 something years old.
And I guess for anyone else out there that's got children and they're considering that they might be a narcissist of some sort, is there any advice you'd give them, like around your experience and what to look out for, and about what they could put in place to get support?
What I'm really afraid with kids, actually, their narcissistic personality, they go to the empaths. So the more empathic you are, the more that personality you have, the more you are affected by the narcissistic behavior or the narcissistic person, actually. So as a child, it's really hard to recognize that, because the parents are it's your whole world. You should look up to them. You see them as someone who is guiding you from one place to another, giving you all advices and everything. So it's really hard for kids to understand why mom or dad are behaving that way. It's always about them coming to yourself, and then you see, okay, something's wrong with me. I'm really bad. My mom is mad at me because I did something wrong. You always come back to yourself, and then you hit yourself so hard that you feel the consequences later in years and years to come. Because they convince you that it's all about you. It's your fault. It's always your fault. If you're not good at school, if you did something, you spilled a glass of water, something's, tiny bits and pieces. It's always your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything in that you can glean from knowing your mom and a bit about her background and childhood herself growing up? Any insight you have in terms of how that developed? I guess those characteristics, was there reward mechanisms in place for her growing up to display that type of behavior, or? Well,
knowing the history and the whole background right now from this age, I can see that she was, as a third child in her family. First two kids were male, so she was the third child and a girl, actually. So her mom didn't accept her. So I think probably that would be the reason why she started behaving like that. Always seeking attention.
Yeah.
Always wanted to be seen, to be recognized in something. And I think that was the main issue where the problem started.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Maybe it's also inherited from the generations before.
And honestly, thank you, Jasmina, for sharing that. I think that's fantastic. And I was going to ask Kathie then quickly just around, because you obviously mentioned about your mum's being the third child and not being accepted. And I guess from a parent's point of view, Kathie, how would a parent, do you think, be able to spot if their child is starting to develop some of these traits, and is there ways to spot it?
There is ways to spot it. Sometimes the children sort of, you notice that they have some bullying sort of tendencies. They notice that their so-called friends aren't really friends. They're more frightened of them. And this comes from working with some younger people at the moment that I've discovered this kind of trait is happening. Young children can learn from their parents. If they have a narcissistic parent, they can often end up with narcissistic tendencies. And that's actually very upsetting if you don't catch it early enough. People say you can't change a narcissist. You can't change them when they've got into that full, this is me kind of scenario, this is my identity. But when you catch them very, very young and you're actually able to have that conversation with them. So my conversation with one of the young children was, tell me about what's happened in your life. Tell me about school. What's school like? Tell me about your parents. Do your parents give you time to talk? Do they give you space? Do they play with you? Are they creative? All of these kind of things. So talking to this young man, we were able to actually get to the core reasons. And the core reason was he really, really wanted his parent to love him, but his parent wasn't able to because he was narcissistic. He could only love himself. So for me, the only way to get this young boy to believe in himself was to actually retrain and reprogram all the thoughts that were going on in his head, because he kept telling himself, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not good enough. My dad doesn't love me because he thinks I'm weak. So then what you get from that, if it's not sort of dealt with, is you get the bully coming out in a child. And that's where you will see a narcissistic child at worst, when they become the bully. And a bully is a person who doesn't love themselves.
Wow.
A bully is a person who holds the most criticism for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
They make others feel bad so that they can feel good. That's the definition of a bully. Jasmina?
Yeah. If I can just add, because this is great, but I just want to say that the same thing goes for empaths. So if you're an empath, it's it's the same thing, but on the opposite side.
Yeah.
It's also about not being good enough, not loving yourself enough, but you hit yourself. You don't hit people on the outside.
Yeah, and you turn everything inwards as well.
Exactly.
And if it's, whether it's an adult or a child, in children it shows up as anxiety. It shows up a lot
diseases.
As social anxiety. Yes. Yeah. So you've got to look out for all of these things, because it's really, really important that you either sort of separate yourself in some way, you put boundaries in place. That's the most important thing. You have to have boundaries in place to deal with these situations.
It sounds like there's a couple of things. I mean, when you were describing there around, I guess, the impact that we have as parents, the impact that our parents have on ourselves and just parenting in general, because they are, as you said, Jasmina, your whole world at that point.
Yeah.
But it kind of always reflects this idea of, if you look at a parent that's an alcoholic, sometimes the son can take that or daughter can take that one of two ways. It's that is my life. My mom or dad's an alcoholic, therefore I must be an alcoholic. And they take on that identity, whereas someone else, another sibling may take on, well, that is showing me the life that I don't want. What I'm kind of hearing when you're describing that from a parent that might have narcissistic tendencies is this ability to create a gap within that child. And that gap is either filled through, from an empath point of view, they're turning that in on themselves, and that's destructive, showing up in disease and lack of self-confidence and self-worth, or it's this drive to create control and fill that gap of love that they never had and experienced when they were younger through controlling the external environment, including other people.
Yeah,
that's true.
It's just very interesting listening to you, because I know a child which, now we're talking about these traits, quite scarily I would identify some of these traits with them, actually, about the bully. And you mentioned as well, Jasmina, about they go towards the warm, compassionate, empathetic people because they don't have empathy themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Narcissists as well, so they're drawn to it, and they just see that, they just like suck the life out of that as much as possible. So actually, bizarrely, I'm starting to see this, and even when you mentioned the bully as well, it makes you think about all the previous bullies you've had in your life and the bullies you recognise, and how sad it actually makes you feel for those bullies now, thinking that they didn't love themselves enough, and that something in their life was chronically wrong at that point as well.
When I take people back in regression in RTT, so I take people back to really important times in their life, not to relive them, but to review them, to review what has happened to them in the past. And I would say probably at least 80, maybe even 90% go back to their childhood. They go back to a period of maybe between the ages of 2 and 8, where something really significant happened to them. And a lot of the time it was bullying. Feeling not good enough, feeling different, that nobody loved them, nobody respected them, they felt stupid. All the things that Jasmina was talking about, that underlies who it takes away everything of who they are as this young person, because they just don't think that they're good enough and they don't fit in. So when you find that someone's had a disruptive past, especially early in very early childhood, you'll find that trauma stays with them. And we might not call it trauma because we might just think, oh, it was a bad experience. But if something stays with you, it is a trauma. And you have to break that bond of the trauma, whether that's breaking the bond with the person or breaking the bond with the feelings and the emotions.
Yeah. If I can add my experience with RTT. So when I realized I started to heal myself through using meditation, learning Reiki, all of these spiritual methods. I released trauma from my physical body. I healed myself completely. I was healthy, everything was fine, and I moved to Prague. Actually, I was living there for 8 years, and I didn't have a lot of contact with my mom. So I was great. 3 years ago, I came back to Croatia, to Zagreb, and you get sucked into that relationship all over again. It was like completely reliving my past. It's bit by bit. Go to the store, do this. It's bits and pieces, coming together, that you don't even notice how strong you get inside and you can't get out. That's really amazing. After all that work that I did, again, I found myself in a situation that I was helpless completely. And then I spoke to Kathie, and she did the RTT for me. And that was something that really actually, so after the healing through my body and through my energy field, that was something that changed my mind completely, because I was always coming back to that space of the subconscious mind where I learned that behavior she used on me when I was a child still was there. It was still there, present.
Yeah.
So after coming back and reconnecting, it was the same thing. I came back to the subconscious, what's the habitual mind. So I basically came back to the same habit of, pleasing my mom all over again. I felt disempowered, low self-esteem again. Everything came back. So when Kathie did the RTT for me, so coming back to that regression, like she said, it really helped me realize that in all of those moments in my childhood, I was completely alone. In those, you just need to fight for yourself. You just need to realize that you are all alone and that you don't need that pain and suffering anymore. It's just enough. And that's where my mind completely changed. And I start listening to the RTT for 21 days. And as I said to her recently, it's like this is hitting you, later on. So even like 6 months later, you can see yourself grow and starting to be more self-confident. And right now, my relationship with her, it's like, okay, hi, how are you? And that's fine. Yeah. I don't have that emotional bond anymore.
Yeah, there's definitely something in there.
Of course, I'm going to help my mom if she needs something, but it's not influencing me in that way anymore.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been created, and a word that you used earlier, Kathie, is about building boundaries. So I think there's a wider message here in terms of as you grow as a child into adulthood, part of that progression, at least from my perspective, is about the ability to take on the ability to create these boundaries. It sounds like when you were at that, when you were a child, you didn't have the capacity or skills or, ability there to put boundaries up. Our children don't, therefore they require parents to create the safe boundaries for the world around them. School, all of that. So I guess almost as you've grown into adulthood, I'm probably interested, Kathie, you touched on some of them in the workplace, but what are some of those boundaries? Clearly getting away from physically being away. You sounded like you were fine away from Croatia, Jasmina. What are some of the other boundaries that I guess you could put in place, whether in the workplace or at a personal level, to kind of manage that, particularly if there's a conflict of emotions? I'm thinking, for yourself, Jasmina, as your mum, there's nothing you can really do about the inherent love that you have for her, even with how you feel you've been treated. There's something you can't really kind of get rid of that. But how do you rationalize and how do you put up boundaries, particularly with someone that there's still some love or some need to have some form of relationship? What are some of those boundaries that we can use?
Well, it's all about the healing process. When you recognize that narcissistic relationship and you start to help yourself, the boundaries present itself. You start to feel compassion towards the person, but in a way that it doesn't affect you anymore. So you understand where they're coming from. Like I can understand right now her suffering and her pain. So that's why I can have boundaries right now. But like you said, I didn't realize that before, of course, as a child. So if I can just add, I have a 13-year-old girl, and she's really like a really big empath, as like I am, So she's really quite influenced with the environment in school. So I think as a parent, it's important for you to listen to your kids, to always talk, ask them to talk, to explain. What's the relationship with the classmates? What happened? Why did it happen? Just analyze all this stuff so that you can explain to them, not being in that any kind of narcissistic relationship. Because I had a recent experience with my daughter Erin, that she came back home crying because two of her friends told her that they need a break from her friendship, because she was not able, they couldn't manipulate her into do some stuff that they wanted her to do, and they basically just discarded her. And this is where you come in as a parent. So I think we need to teach our kids to start building boundaries, because they're definitely going to meet narcissistic people in their lifetime. Yeah. So and that's also,
but children, adults, everybody needs to realize it's not their fault.
No.
It is absolutely not their fault that they're in a relationship with a person like that. And they know that they have to know that they are worthy and they deserve love and they deserve to be respected, all of these kind of things. And they cannot take responsibility for a narcissistic's actions and behaviors. That is not you. You are not responsible for them in any way whatsoever. So you need to actually be okay with yourself about it, because you have been manipulated for so long, and you would make excuses for a person if their behavior was bad. You would always be making excuses for them. So you need to stop that as soon as possible. And as I say, go no contact or very, very limited contact. And that means, it could mean like not seeing them as often. It could mean blocking them on your phone. It could be no contact on social media. All of these things will limit you to how they are trying to manipulate you. Because what they will do, there's a term called hoovering. They will draw you back in again to a vicious cycle.
Exactly.
If you allow them to. And they are so good at it. Because what they do is they do a thing called love bombing, which is they build you up again. They tell you how wonderful you are, how amazing you are, you're clever, you're this, you're that, the next thing. And once they've got you there, they will then start destroying you again and bringing you down again. So that it all returns back to them again. They will do whatever they have to bring you back to the fold, but then they will start destroying you again, because they need your love, your admiration, your affection, your basically 100% attention is on them. So you need to be doing that. And just don't waste time listening to their apologies, because they're empty, absolutely empty. Don't ever go back. That's really, really important. Don't go back to the way it was. And if you can start, say, journaling every day, how you feel, you will start to realize that that will help you as well. Obviously, nature helps, exercise helps, all of these kind of things. And also write yourself a letter about how bad it was, so that if you are ever tempted to go back to a situation like that, as soon as you will read that letter, all those old emotions will come flooding back, and you will never go back again. Because you have to sometimes remind yourself how bad it was, because you're so desperate for that person's love and affection. Because they will tell you that nobody else will ever love you again. Who would want you? You're damaged goods. That's the way that they speak to you. And they make you feel as though you're absolutely nothing. You're not worthy of love. You're not worthy of affection. And the amount of times I've heard women say that is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't do as many narcissistic men, but women feel it's just so difficult for them at times to move forward, because if they've built something together, if they've built a business together, if they have children together, they start to grieve almost when they go no contact. But they're not grieving for the person. They're grieving for the life that they should have had, the dream life that they should have had, that they've built up together. They're grieving that their children won't have the mother, the father, because it's not always women, it's men too. They're grieving that they're not going to have that relationship in the future. And they're so frightened of the future that they are absolutely paralyzed. They feel as though they can't move forward. And that's when really they need to open up. They need to talk. They need to let go of their fears and let the anger out, because the anger is absolutely intense. It's massive. I mean, in RTT, I do a thing called talk to the hurter. And when you talk to the hurter, I've never heard a language like it in all my life. It's unbelievable, but they'll let it out. And only when they let it out can they start to heal. Because when you turn that anger inwards, it becomes depression. And then you've got another set of issues that you need to deal with as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. Something that jumped out to me there, you mentioned around gender, not dealing with as many men as women. I'm assuming this is from a suffering as a result of a narcissist, not our narcissist themselves.
Yeah.
But I mean, it feels very, almost when I'm looking at, as an outsider, I was brought up from a very caring and probably the opposite, of what Jasmina, you were describing around a loving environment. Was told I could, I was better than I probably was at certain things, but that did instill me with a certain amount of self-belief that Chris probably has had to bear the brunt of, and my long-suffering wife. But I think there's something there about, from a gender point of view, where we're in the business world, it feels like we're almost rewarded for this type of behavior. That this ability to control, this ability to keep things on track, to show, and even if you look at our phones, at Instagram, Facebook, our perfectly curated Instagram feed is an external reflection of a completely different reality. It is completely, how you described, Jasmina, this keeping up appearances, everything's kind of absolutely fine. I've created all of this, that will get you your blue tick on Instagram, that will get you the likes and followers, that will get you the leadership positions in big corporates. How do we change that? Any thoughts on how we change that culture?
What are you thinking, Jasmina?
I really, I was thinking about that actually. It's really hard because narcissistic people, they don't understand and see themselves as that. So how to explain to them, look, you're doing something wrong, because they're the smartest one. I'm really, I was thinking about that a lot, how to change that. It still didn't, I still don't have any conclusion about that.
I think narcissists tend to rise up in large corporations because they're seen as very consistent managers, because they don't have a lot of empathy for people. They will use, as I said at the beginning, they will use rules, protocol, HR to keep people in place. And that's just another tool that they have to sort of control people. And they won't step out of the rules, because then they will be seen as not as good, or they're not living what they preach. But it's very, very difficult when they reach those kind of heights to get them out of the business. And a lot of that is down to who recruits them in the first place. What the selection process is like. Narcissists will lie on their CV. They will do that very, very often. And if those CVs are not checked, then you could be bringing somebody that is so disruptive into your workplace, who will actually make the workplace toxic. There are so many things that these people can do in your workplace. You will notice that absenteeism goes up because people don't want to be around that person. People will be going off sick, all of these type of things. People won't want to work with them in a group because they feel as though they're not heard. So really the responsibility starts lower down. The responsibility starts with the selection process of these people coming into your business. And if you're not careful with that selection process, they will work their way up quite quickly.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like a really difficult one for me, having been in like corporate as well. It feels like that type of behavior isn't going to be seen it's very easy to hide that through a selection process. You know, something that I've been, you know, more and more passionate. I'm a transformational coach myself. I'm developing corporate packages just now, but I really am passionate about, or I'm excited about going into workplaces and supporting from a coaching point of view, because I almost see one of the key outcomes as it creates empowerment within staff and teams, allows people to create their boundaries for themselves. You know, all the things that we were talking about, if you can instill that belief, that understanding, that worth of, do you know what, you can say no, and you can say, hey, I'm not working at the weekends, and you can say, no, actually, do not speak to me in that way. All right. And it's almost allowing people, I'm not saying that's at an extreme level doing from a narcissist, you know, point of view. If you've got a narcissist as a boss, then that's going to be very, very difficult. But almost creating that confidence to manage those boundaries for yourself is a way to almost, I see, push back, create a culture of coaching within organizations so that everyone in that organization feels more entitled to stand their ground and create their boundaries. And this is the way that we do things. Actually, that is not acceptable. And
that's what a good company should do. And also, it's all about emotional intelligence as well. You know, how do you treat your team? How do you respect your team? All of these kind of things which you're talking about. Because when you empower your team, that means they won't accept these things. You know, and that person then almost becomes the outsider. And eventually, the rest of the team plus the management will actually start to realize there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with the culture here. And then they'll look into the culture and they'll go, no, most of the people are fine here. Everybody's okay. So where's the problem? And then they start looking at the people.
Would you know,
find that person.
I was going to just say, because you guys have touched upon so many valid points here, and even going back to the bully analogy about the bully, and if you don't catch it earlier, then where do they go? They become the bully in the workplace. They get very far up in the chain because it's that saying that they want to look up. They don't care what they're hitting when they go back down because it doesn't matter with people. And there's a great book, it's Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. I don't know if any of you have read it, where he talks about the different kind of leaders in organisations. You have leaders that will come into an organisation, look at the culture of an organisation, embrace it, make it better, look at the people, make sure the people are in the most perfect conditions can be. He talks about the 2008 crash. If it was around now, he talk about COVID as well, if it was about now. But then he gives you examples of different people who are leaders in organisations where they look at the bottom line, they look at redundancies, they look at staff cuts, they look at all this, they look at people, no empathy, get rid of them. But different organisations will be innovative. They'll work with their staff, they'll offer stuff like they'll say to their staff, well, do you know what, instead of doing layoffs, we would like to find a way. Can people maybe give up a day of their holidays? Would people want to work reduced hours? And you share that burden across the board, including the leaders as well. And even, I think, is it Mary's Meals, Darren, that the founder isn't on a percentage of salary and the lowest paid person in Mary's Meals as well. So again, this is all about sharing that we're in it together, that culture, which is all really important. But I guess from a narcissist point of view, all they're interested in is getting to the top as fast as they can and don't care who they impact to a point.
They don't share other people's vision. They only have one vision, and the vision is for themselves to be the best and for people to respect them and to know that they are better than everybody else.
So and interestingly enough, in that scenario, there's a little bit of research I did very quickly, and it popped up saying 20% of people who are prone to narcissism is in the military. And when you think about that, I'm like, wow, that actually makes sense. You hear about all these stories of people getting bullied and cover-ups and stuff like that. But for people within these industries, and even it said 17% for medical students as well. And you think about how they get abused, and just not abused in a sexual way, hopefully, but more of a physical, mental way. Workway, yeah. But then you think about these environments, how toxic they are and how long they'll take to transition, especially the military. That's a very male-orientated society, cult, if you like, in a way.
That's an amazing example, actually. That's a brilliant example of where a narcissist can thrive, really. You know, and they can hone their personality and their behaviours. You know, that's a really, really interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something in terms of like wrapping up and kind of coming to some conclusion, I mean, the fact that we were even discussing narcissism, it makes me reflect upon my own behaviors. And I recognize I've been guilty. I don't know what your thoughts, Chris. I've definitely been guilty of narcissistic behaviors in my life. Absolutely. But, you know, I actually think there's almost something natural about, if you think like criticism in general, criticism, even if it just goes up here, it doesn't go outside, makes me feel good. It elevates my feeling of moral superiority over others, and I haven't done anything moral to achieve it. How easy is that? So rather than get up and go out and do something, I could just look on Instagram and go, oh, look at them. Yeah. And just for a split second. So even at the smallest level, I would say, you know, it reflects on my own behavior, and I'm not happy to admit, but I kind of reflect upon that and I go, oh, that's actually something I should control. And something that I also think is almost looking at a lot of the traits that we're talking about here, the traits in and of themselves aren't the you know, this idea of having belief in yourself to be the best. Think about the top people in sports, the top people in business. There is nothing wrong with having ambition. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be the best that you can be, and thinking, I am better than other people at this particular nuanced skill. All right, you're not better than anyone else. We all have equal value. But I almost see, you know, what we're not doing is throwing the baby out with the bathwater and saying we should discourage those traits from society. But it feels like we absolutely need to be reflecting more upon how we impact other people and how we arrive at where we want to get to, whatever that vision is, you know, in a way that is not negatively affecting those around us. That's certainly what I'm taking from this conversation. But it's definitely been interesting to be able to reflect on my own experience.
You could talk about this for weeks and still never exhaust this subject, to be quite honest. I remember years and years and years ago when I did a Tony Robbins course, who was like the lifestyle guru at the time. And he said that, you know, gratitude is the most important thing in the world, to be grateful for what you have and the people around you. But he also said it is natural to criticize. It's normal to criticize. And he gave us this exercise to do. He said, try and not criticize or not make a negative comment about anything or anyone, and see how long you can last.
Wow.
You did that recently, Chris, didn't you? Or you did, was it 30 days?
I tried something similar, not to criticize, not because I read something where it says you should always try and give somebody an A, like a pass mark, before you meet them, because then you won't devalue that relationship or critique them straight away. And it's really hard.
It's mega hard.
Really hard. Really hard. I've got 2 kids as well, so it's really hard when they're moaning at you and you just want to moan back and just say something, but you can't. It's so hard. I can't remember how many days I lasted, but it definitely wasn't 30.
It's not very long. I think I lasted about 4 days when I did that all those years ago. But
actually, criticism is really bad for our karma, actually, as well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But one of the things, just another thing that I'm like curious of, I guess, there may be some people that will listen to this and think, do you know what, maybe they're trapped in a narcissistic relationship. Maybe they're like, oh my God, what you've described, that's my boss. I thought the problem's always me. You know, as always, there are 2 sides to every story. Something I'm obviously very passionate from a coaching point of view, to be able to, you know, support people that are struggling in specific circumstances. But where would you, as I guess people a lot closer to, I guess, helping people that have experienced some narcissistic relationships and negative experiences, where should they go? Where should they go if they want to speak to someone, challenge and think about, you know, how do I manage this? How do I start to create those boundaries? Where would they best go off the back of listening to this?
They do need support, because it's very, very difficult to do that on their own. There is no doubt whatsoever. There are loads of coaches, loads of therapists out there, but what you don't want to do is go to some type of therapy that goes on for weeks, months, years. There's
years.
no point in just talking about it. You actually have to deal with the problem, and you need to deal with the underlying core problem. So for me, that is mind coaching, it's emotional coaching, it's finding out, what's keeping you stuck. Why are you still there when you know this is so bad? So this isn't about a plug for Jasmina or myself.
Yeah.
It's
no.
all about finding the support that works for you. You have to change your mindset first. You have to change the negative talk and the pictures that you make in your head. That's what's keeping you stuck. That's what's keeping you where you are now, not where you need to be. So yes, coaching is going to help with that as well, because basically what I do takes the person from the past to the present so they can let go. I would say coaching takes you from the present to where you need to be in the future. So I see it as two distinctly different time scales, really. So you need to see the past first.
Yeah, and is there so therapy, coaching? Obviously, they're very different without digging into them. What about help groups? Are you aware of any of those? Any support groups that might be out there?
There's loads of support groups. I mean, I was trained by Marissa Pearce. I mean, if you're on social media, you'll see Marissa Pearce is there every single day. I was personally trained by her. So I have all the skills to sort of take people from the past back into where they need to be now. That's what I do. That's what I do every single day. I release people from anxiety, stress, depression, from relationships that don't work for them. But you have to deal with your emotions first. There's no point in doing the full coaching bit until you've dealt with the past bit. That's my opinion. What do you think, Darren?
Well, I was going to just jump in there for 1 second before we move on from that, because you just mentioned a couple of things there, which I think is very important. We haven't really touched upon this too much. And before we wrap up, I think it's really important to talk about this, because people might be thinking, I might be in that relationship, but it's not so bad. And you mentioned some of the effects there of what this can be. There's anxiety. This can happen to you: anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, loss of self-worth, can't forgive yourself, physical symptoms, sleep nightmares, all this stuff, emotional liability, the effects on the kids, even PTSD, stuck in a cycle, trust issues, people pleasing, all these self-destructive habits. So all that list of possible things that you could be not on a conscious level realize you're doing, but then that will just eat away at you over time. And I think that's something we haven't really touched upon as much. So I think if you get any of those traits or a number of those traits, that's a red flag that you need to go and look at and get support. I think that's something you just touched upon roughly, Kathie, if that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. You do need to get support. A lot of children will go to Mind, to get support with Mind. They'll go to, there's quite a lot of, all you have to do is Google mental health support if it's mental health you think is the issue. If you think narcissistic support, there are some incredible groups out there that deal with narcissistic support. We are just talking about it today and giving you an idea of what a narcissistic person can be like in your life. I mean, I have narcissists in my extended family. And my husband, when I started, I didn't ever intend doing a lot of work with narcissism, but what happened was, I'd say, God, I can't believe it. Somebody else has booked another one, and this is the underlying tendencies. And he'll go, what is a narcissist? And I said, well, a narcissist is somebody that is controlling, who's somebody that, needs attention all the time. There's somebody that will destroy your self-worth, all this kind of stuff. And he says, I know lots of people like that. And I went, really? I said, you're hanging out with the wrong people.
Yeah, I mean, with the numbers there, I mean, if you're talking about one in, I think you were saying 1 in 10, 10, you're going to come across people. We know at least 10 people. I guess coming back to your previous question, undoubtedly, if you feel you've been a victim of some trauma or some
Mhm.
issue, then I would say therapy for me, we
Yeah.
tend to kind of dig into that and support you from that place. It's not something typically like I would support in, but so I would agree with you on that front. I think in terms of speaking out and looking at things online, I've just done a quick couple of Google searches there, so we'll drop them in the show notes as well, just for anyone that wants to have a look and kind of see what are, dig into some of the themes that we've maybe spoke about here, and to see where they can go for some help. But it does look like there's plenty of groups there, and yeah, some form of therapy I think would also be absolutely beneficial for some people as well. And yeah, I guess it, like, coming back to the point from earlier, it's like almost recognizing like that there's a big scale here that we're talking about, and yes, there's very extreme, like obvious signs that'll be very, very controlling, very, very needy, very, very kind of attention focused, and also there may be intermittent elements of it. So there's a big difference, it feels, from narcissistic tendency, narcissistic behaviors and characteristics, to being a narcissist, that label, as in that is who that person is. So I think definitely being aware of what they are, and almost tracking. I love that point about journaling that you made around write yourself a letter, but almost tracking how you feel over a period of time will help you talk about will show you the frequency. It's like what gets managed what gets tracked get managed. That's so right. Almost treat it like a key performance indicator.
Yeah.
Because our body and our minds are kind of made to forget. Like our brains, we always think that we've got a better memory than we do. And we'll always bias what's just happened. So if we've got a love ball on the back of a love bomb, or where everything's great and it's fantastic, that, when, my partner told me I was a piece of shit and I'm no worth and no one will love me 2 weeks ago, that's a distant memory now.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't really mean it. They really mean this. So almost a way of being able to kind of try and keep those emotions, keep a track and log of that, so you've got some hard empirical evidence for yourself to make the right decisions for you.
Well, people want to move away from pain into pleasure again. So that's why they forget so quickly what was so hurtful to them. Yeah. Because, as you say, the love bombing, that's what it does to you. It hoovers you back in again. So you're back in that cycle, if it's a personal relationship or whether it's at work. We could talk, as I say, about this forever, and we would never even get to the bottom of it.
and that's it. And I just want to say a massive thank you to you both, but especially Jasmina, for coming on and not even just sharing your experience with your mum, but sharing your experience with your daughter and saying how she's one of the most empathetic people like yourself. I think that just shows how you can break that cycle that could have been passed on. And I hope that the relationship between your daughter and her grandmum is there. It'd be great to hear that, but that's probably another time for another conversation. But
yes,
I really want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing that with your personal story. And yes, thank you again, Kathie, for sharing your information, your wisdom and everything like that. How can people find yourself, Kathie? And how can people find yourself?
If they Google, God, I can't even remember what my website is.
We'll put it in the show notes.
If they put in Kathie Reid, RTT, Rapid Transformational Therapist, they'll get a hold of me.
Excellent. And what about yourself, Jasmina?
Well, I only on English is only Instagram, so maybe JC Mindful Living it's called. So I should do the website on English as well. So
no, perfect. Instagram's fantastic. But again, thank you very much for coming on. It's been fantastic to chat to you, and I think we'll have to pick this back up at a later stage. It'll be great to discuss it a bit further.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
having
me, guys. Yes.
As always, thank you so much for listening to the Pop Pod this week. If you'd like to leave a review or share the podcast with others, then that'd be awesome. You'll find us on Instagram at the Pop Pod, and on Facebook we have a community group called Purpose to Progress that anyone can join. And we'll be back every Monday with a new episode, but until then, Stay on purpose, and we'll see you next week.